Good afternoon. Welcome back to another episode of In Other News. My name is Gabe Salazar, political analyst, local writer. I'm joined tonight by my panel, who we are all familiar with, of course. To my right, Erica Adamson, political analyst, local writer. I'm also joined by Angelo Catanzaro, attorney and political scientist. And I'm joined by Kurt Mehta, local attorney. Tonight we have a year in review. We're going to be discussing some of the various topics regarding changes in the political, economic, and social developments in the United States since the presidential election in November of 2024. So to begin with, our very first episode did a review about the topic of abundance, a book written by Ezra Klein. And upon our first episode, we were discussing the prospects about how abundant supply-side economics can be helpful in order to help the American economy obtain a greater affordability in American society. So on that topic, I suppose we should discuss the developments since November 2024, when we've had this presidential election. How has the American economy changed in terms of its affordability? So to begin, just a question, I suppose, if anyone would like to jump in. How should we be assessing the changes of affordability in the American economy? Are there sort of landmark features that we can use to say we are now in a more affordable or less affordable position?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that one of the big mistakes that the Biden administration made and that Vice President Harris made when she was running for president was there was a lot of focus on, by this metric, by this expert's metric, the stock market is up. The economy is doing great. We look at all these accomplishments. And that doesn't really mean anything to ordinary people if they feel that they can't afford to put food on the table or afford to pay their rent, things like that. And I bring this up because I think this is the issue that Republicans are currently running into now, where arguably Trump won in 2024 because of the economy. And now a lot of voters are realizing that they didn't get what they voted for, at least in terms of cost of living.
In terms of how Trump had pitched the affordability to ordinary Americans, were there certain things that he promised or certain goals that he was trying to achieve in affordability that he campaigned on? Has he obtained any of those things that he campaigned for economically?
I mean, we do have the ongoing back and forth trade war and the tariffs, which raised the price of a lot of consumer goods and caused a lot of panic, I would say. There was recently, actually this morning, a New York Times report came out that the Liberation Day tariffs, which really didn't take effect until August, caused imports to drop 5.1%. And now that's relevant because that's affecting a lot of consumer goods. We don't live in an economy where everything is produced here, where you can just fully buy things that are made in the U.S. And even if something is made in the U.S., it's made with components that didn't come from the U.S. And so I don't really understand what the goal was there. He was really promising that these tariffs were going to maybe not lower the cost of living altogether, but lower prices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, make things in the stores
things affordable.
Right,
yeah.
cheaper.
I mean, in a lot of the presidential campaign last year, both the president and the vice president ran based on the fact that they were both talking about the cost of bacon. Famously, the cost of eggs were going through the roof. These are issues that the average person in our country to run a household, they're extremely important, and it seemed like they were coming upon a deaf ear on the part of the Democratic Party. Like Erica was just saying earlier, the Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris and President Biden, they simply were not acknowledging the fact that the cost of goods had gone up significantly through inflation post-COVID. There was an explanation for it, but I think one of the mistakes that the Democrats made was there wasn't enough empathy and there wasn't a plan that was at least outlined to the American public that this is what we're going to do to, reduce costs. And now, like you were saying, Erica, I mean, the tariffs, of course they were going to increase prices.
Right.
Inevitably, yeah, everything gets passed to the consumer. They're not going to absorb the cost themselves, most manufacturers.
Right.
So now, the president's in this situation where he's doing something very similar to what he criticized. Economy's great. Again, looking at the stock market as a benchmark for, how the country's doing. Mm-hmm. So, it's kind of interesting. And now, we've got these candidates running around the country, obviously lower offices, things like, mayors of cities, big cities in some cases, that are really, have embraced this whole issue of affordability, and they're getting a lot of attention.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Republicans have always had kind of, at least in the time that I've been paying attention to politics, they've always had a bit of a monopoly on the issue of the economy. You vote for Republicans if you care about the economy, you vote for Democrats if you care about cultural issues. That was always kind of the perception I felt. But I think all of the Democrats who won this year, and it was pretty much across the board, all Democrat success, they all ran on a platform of affordability. I saw some statistics from AP. In Virginia, half of their voters said the economy was the top issue, and Spanberger won 6 in 10 of those voters. In New Jersey, Cheryl won about 2/3 of voters who called the economy the top issue in New Jersey. And then in New York City, more than half of voters said the cost of living was the top issue, and Mamdani won 2/3 of this group. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see Democrats make inroads on this issue, and I'm really glad to see it personally.
Yeah, but the problem is that we hear about how inflation has affected us and that there is inflation, that the cost of things are going up. But I haven't heard one thing from either the Biden administration or the Trump administration that suggests a method for keeping the rate of inflation down. Mm-hmm. Inflation is part of our capitalist system. Without inflation, there's no capitalism. Historically, the cost of living goes up 2 to 4% every year. Right. So the increase, the greater increase in inflation, I don't think we ever got higher than 5 or 6%.
Yeah.
The real issue is why? You had mentioned the stock market. Okay, well, the stock market is that a barometer of how the economy is doing? It really is in one sense. Why are costs going up? Why are we being charged more for goods? And the answer is profit. Okay, the manufacturers, the service providers, everyone wants to make more money. Well, who are they going to make more money from? Us.
Sure.
Okay, and when they're making more money, then the companies and the corporations, are more profitable. Okay, and that's why there is a connection between the stock market and the economy. Now,
to some extent, Angelo. I think in part why the stock market is high, and maybe this is a pat on the back for our society, is that you look at the top companies that we have, they're kind of like, the entire economy is reliant on these companies. You look at Apple, you look at Google, you look at Meta, you look at Tesla, and a good portion of the American economy completely relies on Silicon Valley's, developments.
Relies in what way?
Relies in terms of, kind of like, the tide being, up, because these companies are doing extraordinarily well.
Because they are charging a lot of money for what the services and the goods that they're providing, which is providing them with a larger profit margin. The only...
Sure, no, I don't disagree. Yeah, but these companies are really, in the stratosphere compared to...
Right, and then the stock market, I don't know the statistic, but not every American participates in the stock market.
Absolutely not.
Okay, so this profit gorging that's going on and the huge profits that are being made by these corporations and being basically meted out to their higher executives, is adding to the cost of goods.
Yeah, but can you discount the fact that, towards the tail end of the Biden administration, we were coming out of COVID. We kind of forget about that, and there were some serious, issues with the supply chains, and that was causing, real demand issues, and therefore things were going up in value. When that started calming down, you've got the current administration, hitting companies with tariffs, foreign companies with tariffs. So if there was any decrease in inflation, that's been made up now by, increases in the tariffs, and then those costs, as Gabe was saying, were being passed on to the American consumer.
But at the end of the day, the cost of goods is directly related to the producer and the service providers, okay? When we increased minimum wage, what do we expect is going to happen at the pizza stand? The price of pizza
is going to go up.
All right, okay.
Absolutely.
And that trickles down through every aspect of our economy. I mean, I don't know what the solution is, but the solution has to be related to profit control, okay, or distribution of profit, okay, more universally, so that those profits can reach pockets that can still buy the consumer goods. And that's not what's happening.
So how do we do that? I mean, Erica was just talking about, Mamdani in New York, got a lot of traction, obviously, from the population of that city, because there's talk about, the only way to really accomplish that I can think of and still preserve a capitalist society is through taxation.
Tax the ultra wealthy.
Right. Or, in Trump's
right.
proposal, right, the offsets of these tariffs would be reimbursed to the American public.
Everyone gets a
Everyone-
$2,000 check.
$2,000 check.
Right.
Right.
Well, that's one way of distributing the wealth,
Yeah,
okay?
sure.
But I think, on the other hand, we have to, and taxation is the only mechanism that we have
Right.
to do that.
Well, that's what I mean.
Okay.
Right.
But the taxation, most people think of it, even if you're going to be taxing corporations higher, they still feel that the government should not be invading, okay, the ability of companies and individuals to make more money. Well, hello. Okay, that's why eggs cost more money. That's why bacon costs more money.
Yeah.
I don't really know how we can attack that, and I'm going to be very interested in seeing what Mamdani does, because this is the first real test in the United States of having a mega presentation of how we're going to socialize costs and how we're going to socialize the distribution of wealth.
What are some of the things that he outlined? Do folks remember? Mamdani's.
So you got caps on rent hikes.
Yeah.
So, stabilizing, I think that's also one of the major issues in affordability. Can you afford to pay for where you're living? Can you make that ends meet? If the cost of housing is just so compact, you end up either having to sacrifice where you're living, so you can't afford to live in New York. Where else do you go? You go out into the middle of nowhere, and you find something that affords you there. But then, what's your income like? Well,
he also has he wants the universal daycare, correct?
Right.
Right.
I think that could be huge.
Right.
If productivity is really the most important thing for you, then you could argue that universal childcare will allow both parents to work outside of the home so that someone doesn't have to stay home for the child.
But who's paying for that? Taxes.
The ultra wealthy.
That's right.
Yeah, but the taxation
Higher end of the
which again,
And that would also mean that there's more money in the pocket of the consumers if they're not, again, staying home to take care of children.
Right.
And
Sacrificing,
offsetting, the cost of transportation within the city by providing free bus service.
Right.
There was one talking about housing. There was an article I read recently that one of the biggest components of the inflation or the increase in rental and buying homes is the fact that boomers, okay, are hanging on to their properties, okay, and now selling them at mega prices, okay, and you buy a house in 1990 for $200,000, and then you sell it in 2025 at $560,000 or $700,000. That's a huge profit.
I don't know how a young working family, in their mid to late 20s, early 30s, can reach those kind of numbers, without getting family help. Families that have
that's where we
money.
have the 50-year mortgage.
50-year mortgage.
The 50-year mortgage.
It's also proposed by our president.
But Angela brings up a good point.
Right. No. Absolutely.
Who are a lot of those houses being sold to?
They're being sold to people who do tear downs and build bigger houses.
Right.
Right. Private
But they're,
companies.
they're
Right.
corporations that are then going to turn these around to become, high-end rentals.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's another big issue in terms of, Gabe talking about the concept of abundance, and there isn't an abundant amount of housing out there, expensive or not.
I think J.D. Vance also mentioned there was a housing crisis. So in his estimation, we would need about 5 million new houses in order to address the housing issue in this country. But
I don't disagree with the vice president on that in terms of the number.
But where's the plan to develop them? I mean, apparently blue cities is where they're predominantly in need.
Yeah.
So why not, again, what sort of balance are we talking about here in terms of development, right? Just focus in on the blue states? Are we going to do this nationally, spread out the 5 million new houses across the nation? How are we establishing this plan? And there is no plan. It's just
Right, because I was going to just ask you, who's the we you're talking about?
Exactly.
Yeah, the federal government.
Right.
Yeah.
In a lot of states now, and I don't know whether they're blue states or red states or a combination of both, there is programs for insisting on affordable housing as a proportion of new housing so that you can get more density, which developers like. So on the same piece of property that I might have been able to build 50 units, okay, if I make 35% of those units affordable, now I can build 200 units. That seems to address the issue, one, of more housing, and two, of affordability. But then the definition of affordability comes in, because affordability is usually tied to medium income, okay? And so the affordability is you can buy a unit at an affordable price if you make less than 51% of the median income of the community.
Right.
Well, median incomes are higher and higher and higher because we have an upper end of median incomes.
That's in the stratosphere.
That's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so now your
or
median
more.
income is $167,000. So,
Right.
okay.
So then who qualifies?
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, we're having these issues right here in Little Burlington, Vermont, right?
To the new developments of apartments. That
Yeah,
we just had.
there's always this promise that there's always going to be a proportion of the homes being constructed that are going to be, sequestered for affordable housing and for people that, make less money. And then you find out about what the rent is, and it's like $2,500 a month. I was like, oh, okay, that's the affordable housing.
Right.
Well, it's affordable, I guess, compared to the $6,000 a month.
Right.
And is that really fair to?
And there are market conditions that also, in Burlington, the market condition is that we house 10,000 students.
Yeah.
Okay, who are not working people, whose parents are paying the rents, and who are willing to pay above market so that their children can have better locations, better housing.
Sure.
I mean, Burlington sort of is.
I mean, it's an anomaly, right? But that being said, it's the problem of affordable housing exists in this town also. Mm-hmm. Different set of conditions, I concede.
So maybe we should have universal health care, universal housing.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's not a completely foreign concept, but no, I also did want to bring up one of these issues because part of that assessment by the vice president had to do with immigration. So that 5 million new houses he alleged were being used to house immigrants. That was what causing this lack of affordable housing to naturally U.S. American citizens. So in that respect, I mean, we also have had a lot of interactions in developments in immigration this year. Since the president was inaugurated, there's been a huge whirlwind of events in returning to legal, social, and economic changes for immigrants and how the United States has dealt with them. As far as anything currently notable, what would you say is the trend going forward, Kurt? This is your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I mean, look, the president ran in 2016 as well as in 2020 and again in 2024 with a very clear message. And the message, I think, that got him a lot of attention, especially in 2016, when he talked about, the effect of immigration from the Southern Hemisphere. I think he was specifically talking about Mexico, is he said that, a significant, abundant number of people that were coming from the southern border, were murderers, rapists, thieves, and I forget the other pejorative that he used.
Drug dealers.
Okay, yeah, I didn't want to leave anyone out.
I believe he said they're not nice people.
Yeah, they weren't nice people. Also,
Right.
tough, bad hombres. I think
Exactly.
he said. Right, if I pronounced that right.
Yep, that's right.
So, but he got a tremendous amount of attention. The president ran a few times before that on various platforms, different parties. Didn't really get anywhere. When he made the immigration argument that the immigration numbers had to be reduced significantly, he got a lot of attention, and it's never gone away since then, really. Even when he was out of office, it didn't go away. Right. And then when we saw scenes during the course of the Biden administration where, I think things were kind of scandalized, kind of exploited, but it did happen where you had significant numbers of people coming up from the southern border. And, initially the Biden administration really didn't have a plan. People were concerned in this country that the way the narrative was being created was that, that there was essentially an invasion taking place at the southern border, and you have people that are concerned that, our country is going to fundamentally change when you have that many people that are coming in, with a different language that look differently concerning, people that are in certain demographics in our country. And it caused a great deal of fear, which, this administration does really well, taking advantage of and exploiting, and politicians in general do that.
Right. Do you feel that there's any long-term end in sight as far as what the policies that he's been advocating for, pushing into place?
Well, the president has been successful in reducing the flow of migrants crossing the southern border. Yeah, it's really down to a trickle, supposedly, of people that are undocumented that are crossing the border. The president's also gone after people that, not just undocumented people, but people that came in legally on visas and visas that expired, and then folks didn't go back. They've been going pretty aggressively against those people. They're going, with the assistance of DOJ earlier in the year. They check to see, who's been trying to get tax identification numbers, who's trying to open up bank accounts. Right. And they've gone pretty aggressively against legal immigration, because I think the premise is that they want to reduce the number of, people coming from outside this country right. and settling here, and primarily from developing countries. I think I can probably quote the president, I think during his first administration when he said, how come we're not getting, more people from Norway? Well, Norway is a democratic socialist country where the people don't really want to leave, right. unless they want to travel on vacation somewhere. Right. So you'll occasionally see them in New York City, but that's kind of the reason. But yeah, I think the goal is to reduce immigration, not just quote unquote illegal immigration, which means people crossing the border undocumented, but legal immigration also. Visa categories across the board have been reduced.
Now, is the suppression of immigration a good thing for this country or a bad thing for this country?
I mean, that remains to be seen. The president, and his administration is taking a pretty big gamble here. I mean, we've got about 250 years of history, and I'm just going from a capitalist mindset sure. of corporations, businesses, always having a supply of cheap labor. Whether it was the Germans coming in the late 1700s, which, that was supposed to be, according to Ben Franklin, the end of the world. Those people are never going to, be able to assimilate in this country. To, the Italians, the Irish, Jews, people from Latin America, Mexico. Now you've got, a significant amount of immigration from Asia right. and Africa. And again, the argument is the same. These people are never going to assimilate. Is it good? I don't know. This constant supply of cheap labor that businesses have had for the last 250 years because of waves of immigration have, in part, insulated us, given the United States a cushion from a lot of recessions that the Europeans and other countries have had because of high labor costs.
So suppressing it might not be good.
Yeah.
And suppressing it might be also adding to the reality of price increases.
Right. The unaffordability.
Absolutely.
I have no problem with buying a 90-cent trinket that was made in China.
Right.
Now that same, with the tariffs, that trinket now costs $3.
Of course.
Or clothing, shirts. I mean,
Yeah.
probably everything we're wearing here was not made in the United States.
Yeah.
So what?
Right.
Okay. Or if it was made in the United States, it was made by people who have immigrated into the United States.
More likely than not.
Because they have that skill set, or they
Yeah.
don't have the economic need. Okay.
And then there's another part of it, Angelo. There's, and this happens everywhere. So we're not, specifically attacking our own people here, Americans. There's certain work Americans don't want to do. They don't really want to pick grapes. They don't want to, slaughter
dishes, right.
slaughter animals in, really, gross, slaughterhouses. That's not what people normally, in many cases, don't want their children to do that have been here, a couple of generations or more. Low-end computer work, there's a lot of different areas that, we don't really there's kind of a consensus that, people don't want to do that work here.
So why can't
and the work needs to get done. We need to get our lawns.
So why can't we funnel in people through an intelligent immigration policy? And wasn't the answer was that it's never been set up properly? I don't necessarily want to suppress the influx of foreigners. I think it's not a bad idea to get into place a form of regulation and a form of entry that's fair and that's prompt, okay, and that allows people to come here.
But not everyone agrees with you. A lot of people look at it as,
hardly anybody agrees with you.
No, downtown doesn't look the way it did when my grandpa was here. And and that bothers them, whether it's because the religion's changed, there's no nativity scene at City Hall anymore, or they're hearing different languages.
But those are the obstacles we have to overcome.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, and the answer to that is that we'll deal with it.
Yeah.
We've changed. Our
Right.
culture has changed because we have an influx of different beliefs, of different ethnicities, different cultures. I think that's what makes this country better than any other, because we have that influx.
Right.
Now,
but isn't there a significant portion of the country that that has the nostalgia for what things look like, 50 years ago, 60 years ago?
So would I. Okay, I remember when Church Street didn't have cars. I didn't have a walkway. It was cars.
Right.
I got used to it.
Yeah. Right.
No, so there is a lot of.
But isn't that who the president's administration is really, kind of attracted that?
Yes, that's
public.
MAGA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
That's MAGA, and
Okay.
that's they have the right to believe that and to want that.
Yeah.
But we have to look at the impact that is having on the rest of the country and the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Hey, we don't want 25,000 people pouring across the southern border every day. Okay. Obviously, we can't handle it. But we could handle a greater number than what are coming in now in an intelligent fashion. And the same thing, like you pointed out before, there is no reason that we shouldn't also be attracting Asians and Europeans, okay, and people from other parts of the world. Isn't that what we are? The great melting box, as I was taught in the third grade. For some reason now we don't want to melt anything else in, and I'd like to see a change in policy and a change in vision to get back to that.
Yeah, I think, from a bipartisan approach, the Biden administration, and I'm going to go back to, ancient history, the George W. Bush administration, both put out plans that were talking about a streamlined process of immigration into the country according to the needs that the country had in areas, nursing, there's shortages, there's medical care, of course, other things that we just mentioned, working the slaughterhouses, cutting the grass, construction. But both the Biden and the Bush administration, they got a lot of flack from their own supporters in many cases that said that, we really don't want these high numbers of people coming in, legally or illegally.
Well, that's the reality, and and again, until we get an administration that can figure it out, and we get a policy and legislation in place that deals with it, I don't know what the other answer is. We need to have a flow of human beings into this country from other parts of the world. That's what we need.
What do you younger people think? I don't know, you hear, in terms of competition for jobs, opportunities, I'm just kind of curious. When you see large numbers of people from Asia in universities, maybe they're taking up spots, that, maybe that friends, could have gotten.
Sure.
So
I'm thinking more, it's great that one of the whitest states in the country is still able to attract at their university people from all over the world. I don't know.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'm a little
I don't feel
biased.
threatened by immigration at all. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Right.
In one of my classes, very early on at UVM, I totally forget the professor and the name of the class, but we talked about the refugee resettlement program specifically in Burlington, Vermont, and how when they choose where refugees are placed, they intentionally choose a lot of the time smaller cities that are experiencing maybe some brain drain, or not even brain drain, but just like people moving out when they're moving in. And how immigrants and refugees can help revitalize smaller cities. And that's what I think about. I'm not thinking about, I'm not going to be able to get a job because we let too many people from whatever country come in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But do you folks, through social media and other means, get the impression that other people that are contemporaries of yours, age-wise, do feel that way? Or is that what the messaging that you're getting from, may he rest in peace, Charlie Kirk, but like other similar people like that
Yep.
who are trying to take advantage? I mean, you've got, Nick Fuentes now, again, a little bit even more extreme in terms of his rhetoric than Charlie Kirk, but also, a really strong anti-immigration, platform stance
Right.
that he's adopted.
Absolutely.
Are you guys seeing a lot of that on TikTok and
I'm
other?
not seeing it amongst my generation.
No,
like my
I'm
age
really
group.
not. Like maybe we're in an
but-
echo chamber, but I feel like
Yeah, I
young
don't-
people are
Right.
are supportive of immigration.
Really?
It isn't
Yeah.
that big of an issue. I think because again, maybe we're younger, we're more interconnected with internet, social media. Like
Yeah.
we are exposed to other countries, right?
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to understand them as not being very much different from how we are.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think there's more commonalities and reasons to be opposed to them. But I will say, I mean, this administration did get a lot of its traction against things like DEI, inclusivity, diversity. You had the Harvard School of Affirmative Action decision came out
Right.
recently.
Right. Yeah.
So I feel like that movement had been in the background, maybe in the 90s and 2000s. But for this generation, more 2020, 2010s, it
Yeah.
really wasn't that big of an issue.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
that really stemmed from something that came maybe in the 80s and 90s that
Yeah.
we had this question about, well, these people are taking my son's spots in college or something
Right.
to that effect.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I've often heard that over the years.
sure.
Yeah, that even from people, whether they're my age or older than me,
Right.
saying that my kids, they're, they would get into that program, that STEM program,
Right.
but because of the amount of people that are coming from Asia, it's 60% or 50% that population, and they're taking away, spots for quote unquote our children.
Sure. I mean, but again, like, I don't see most of my peers that I associate with
Yeah.
raising that as an issue that they would really, want to actually exclude people from other countries on
Yeah.
that basis. But, again, maybe it's an issue that had its context in earlier generations,
Right.
at least since the Bakke decision or something to that effect.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, we did have that decision. So there is no longer an affirmative action, nationwide.
Yeah, as far as that name,
Wrestle.
yeah, over the last few
I mean,
years.
yeah, now they're trying to rectify that, trying to look into, what about their backgrounds, economically speaking. Usually, like they'll be more deferential to children who had tougher backgrounds, irrespective of nationality, race, any other categories which are considered diverse by this administration,
Yeah.
which has really done a lot to try to stymie that categorization. Anything having
No, it's
to
been
do-
anything
Right.
DEI, whether it's immigrant based or ethnically based,
Right.
racially based. I mean, that is being rolled back.
Yeah.
In the military, one of the earliest examples of diversity that was successful in this country. It doesn't go back that far, but it was kind of almost experimental where when the troops were integrated
Right.
by, I forget if it was Truman or Eisenhower, that they, prior to that, we had a segregated army.
Right.
And it was one of the first, large-scale attempts at quote-unquote kind of DEI.
Right.
And I think most people are proud of the military in this country.
Yeah. As far as its legacy has gone, I mean, but yeah, I mean, I guess we'll still have to see just how far the immigration.
But at what point does affirmative action run its course?
Well,
Okay, is it when the group that you're speaking of has assimilated to a certain extent? I mean, affirmative action was clearly necessary in the 60s and 70s. Okay, and is it still necessary?
Yeah, good
Good
question.
question, yeah.
I mean, again, I think some of the severity could be compared to even voting rights. I think that was also under fire recently. Do we need to have, protections in the southern states where there used to be Jim Crow? Is that still a necessity? And I think recently as well, they also were hesitant to re-implement those kinds of protections for voters in the South, which would lead then again to kind of a proliferation of certain the policies that would lead to more people of color being unable to access voting equally.
Well,
But
Again,
Angela's question, I get Angela's question,
hypothetically, analogous
is there a
to that.
number? Like, okay,
Right.
median income has to hit X dollars, and that means, okay, everything's okay now, and we don't need affirmative action. I don't know, when does it
Right.
run its course? I mean, do you have an answer for your own question?
Well, no, I think that the problem that we ran into was it seemed like certain ethnic groups were being favored,
Yeah.
okay, for admission into institutions just so that they can say they had this color blending rather,
Right.
okay, but when you have affirmative action, you also then have affirmative exclusion. Okay,
Yeah.
and it's not then just based on the merit. I mean, I don't know. Is Black America ready to fully assimilate into our culture and into our institutions without affirmative action?
Well,
I-
for Clarence Thomas, the answer is definitely yes.
Yes.
Right. But yeah, we know how he feels about many
And
things.
and how far back do we have to look as to say that this class deserves affirmative action because of what occurred to them 200 years ago, 100 years ago, 20 years ago? So I don't know if it's capable of sustaining itself. So the decision that sort of metered it down, okay, I wasn't totally upset with that. Let's see what happens without it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you go back to, I mean, this isn't a conversation about immigration per se, but whether or not, you want a certain demographic, overrepresented in a school if some of these affirmative actions aren't, affirmative action programs are taken away.
And then
Is that okay?
Right.
I mean, if, I know where Gabe's originally from on the West Coast, a lot of the colleges, they're about over 60% Asian, University of California system.
Right.
I mean, they're saying that, Harvard could go in that direction also. I mean, is that the best, outcome for, different groups that we have in this country?
Yeah, my nephew went to UCI Irvine.
Yeah.
And he used to refer to it as the University of Chinese Immigrants.
Yeah.
Okay, because 60 or 70% of the student population
was
at
from Asia.
UCI Irvine was from
Yeah.
Asia.
Yeah.
Now, does that make it bad? Does that help the rest of the country? The fact that we are trying to assimilate and we are trying to integrate, is that good for me? Is that good for my grandkids?
I mean, the premise is that
Sure.
certain people didn't. What was that, Erica?
I said, I don't really care.
Yeah, but certain people never had a seat at the table.
Yeah.
No,
you
I mean,
know,
but
and
even
I
more
think
so.
That's more important.
So,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
connected to that, Angela, I guess is also the DACA program under Obama initiated to try
Going
to
back
help
to the immigration
the students,
issue,
right,
yeah.
of immigrant parents who are here usually undocumented,
Yeah.
and then their children decide to go to college,
Right.
right, under this exemption. But even with this administration, like the question of birthright citizenship was also under fire under the
Absolutely.
president's executive order.
Yeah.
So they're just trying to do anything in which they can try to, right, I guess, defend whatever they believe to be, the right answer, which is don't look at race, don't look at ethnicity, just, right.
Look at merit.
Sure, if that exists. I mean, what about wealth, right?
Yeah, I think
So,
if any form of affirmative action should exist, it should be like wealth and class based.
Yeah, I mean, there are, people even within ethnicities that have been discriminated against that happen to be rich. So should they get, the attention that, someone who is less well off but happens to be from Appalachia and is white, and for generations has, their families have not been able to, rise up economically.
My simple answer to that question is that I think the answer is yes. I think forced integration is what made this country better. I think having my grandchildren go to a school that has mixed ethnic groups and mixed ethnic people and people of different classes, yes, I think that's good, because I think that's the world they live in. On the other hand, I can understand why someone who gets excluded, would be distressed by it.
Yeah.
But at some point you just say, hey, this is what I think and this is why I think it, and I think it does make a better world.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about the thing of things being forced, like the forced integration, Brown versus Board of Ed, the adoption of gay marriage in this country, it was forced. If it was probably put up to a vote back when the decision was done, when the decision was made, Supreme Court, it probably would not have passed.
Right.
We kind of had to have it forced down our throats. Okay, the justices on the Supreme Court, they're not going to discriminate based on gender as to who can get married to one another.
Well, on the topic of the ultra rich, and I guess going into a little bit of more current events, a little bit on Epstein, perhaps this is the most current thing that we have in our remaining time.
Well, we didn't leave very much time to talk about
Right.
Mr. Epstein and Mr. Trump, and the issue that I was looking at is, why did Trump flip-flop on his position on the Epstein files?
Right.
It's no surprise that he did, In the 8 or 12 years that we've known him as a political figure, according to the Washington Post, he has either lied or misled publicly over 35,000 times. So when he makes a proclamation and he says one thing that he's going to do, we have no right to believe that that he believes it, that he's going to do it. Only that he said it. His whole, and again, we don't have much time to really dig too deep, but Donald Trump has been a known womanizer, if not a predator, for decades. I mean, we go way back into the early 90s. He's been accused, again, according to sources, well over 28 people have brought suit against him for sexual misconduct.
But Angela, do you think that these files being released, if you were to sign them and release them, would they do anything at this point?
What do I think that he waited. One of the reasons that he flip-flopped was because he wanted to assess, what damage the release of them would be, and he knew that by having control over those files, which he has had, for the last 8 or 9 months, he can determine what was in it, and he can put mechanisms into place to control actually what's going to be released. Do I think you're going to get a carte blanche of everything? No. Do I think that Donald Trump wants them released? Absolutely not. He was forced into the position of release because they were going to get released, and now he can say, hey, I released them. As we discussed the other day, there are mechanisms in the legislation that allows exemptions from the releasing of these documents, including his recent edict of starting investigations against 5 or 6 prominent Democrats. Those investigations are by the Justice Department. Well, that's going to be an excuse not to release certain things. Right. The fact that this legislation also protects innocents, and the innocents aren't only innocent victims, but people who may have been wrongfully implicated, in the Epstein scandal. Well, we may never see those either, because that's one of the prongs of the legislation. Moreover, though, I think Donald Trump had a fear of a lot of things getting exposed. I mean, I'm not going to go through it, but like I said, in the 90s, in the 2000s, in the 2010s, he has been involved and been accused of molesting women over and over again. So why wouldn't the public think that maybe something nefarious happened when he was hanging out with a convicted predator and sex trafficker.
Right.
You know, there are other indications. Look at what he has done recently with Ghislaine Maxwell. Okay, he sort of didn't release anything until after he got his own lawyer into a prison with her, okay, and made sure he knew what she was going to say or wasn't going to say, or paid her to say what he wanted her to say. And now she's living in you know, the Ritz-Carlton of prisons. So, yes, he flip-flopped, but I don't think he ever intended to release them when he first said that he was going to, even though he campaigned.
That, I was going to just say, that was a part of the campaign, right?
Yeah.
Aside from the affordability and all these other things we talked about earlier.
Right.
You know, recently, well, back in, I think it was in 2016, Steve Bannon said on, you know, in some interview that over the course of the 2016 campaign, Trump's lawyer paid off over 100 women. He took care of them. Okay, who are those women? I don't know. Why would Bannon make that statement? You know, after Trump and Musk had their little tit-tat, okay, Musk came out and said the reason that these files will never be released is because Donald Trump is all over them. So what happened over the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks with the victims coming out so vocally, okay, and so emotionally, he was in a corner. And
Where do you think this is going to
Right.
go?
I mean,
or end?
so we reached
We're going to
the
get heavily
end of our show.
redacted,
Yeah.
heavily
We've reached-
redacted version of the files.
Yeah,
is
that's
we're
what you
gonna
think?
get. Yeah.
Yeah.
1 minute, where do I think it's going to go? Nowhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that we're going to get leaks and releases, and we're not going to see the whole picture, okay? And I don't think that anything that comes out is ever going to be able to paint Donald Trump as a criminal. And in fact, there's no record or any evidence of him ever engaging in criminal activity anyway. I mean, all it does is just shows what kind of a liar he is, okay? And
But the
how
president's going to get off on this. I mean, he's not going to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
He'll be all right.
I think he wanted to ride it through the 2026 elections, okay, and that was his real goal, okay. So, and I think it might hurt in those elections because now we can campaign on this, and you know, to the extent that you want to have people in office who support that man.
Right. Well, the bill is on his desk, and we'll have to see what comes of that.
Still hasn't signed it.
Still has not signed it as of today. But on that note, that is the end of our episode. So we wish you all a good night until the next episode.